Hey, welcome back to F1 Sparks. So let me get this straight. Charles Leclerc cuts the first corner, keeps position, no penalty. Max Verstappen forces Hamilton wide and cuts a corner, no penalty. George Russell loses 3 positions because of their mess, no penalty. But Lewis Hamilton makes one mistake at turn 4 and gets a 10-second penalty that ruins his entire race. Yeah, we need to talk about why the stewards in Mexico seem to have a very selective memory about who deserves punishment. Stay to the end because this wasn't just bad stewarding, it changed the entire championship fight. Alright, so the 2025 Mexican Grand Prix just turned the championship on its absolute head. This was proper drama from start to finish. Lando Norris walked away with a completely dominant victory. We're talking a 30-second margin here, which is just absurd. But the real story is what happened behind him and what it all means for the title fight. So here's the thing, just a few weeks ago after Zandvoort, Oscar Piastri was sitting pretty with a 34-point lead over Norris. 34 points! That's the kind of cushion where you start thinking, yeah, this kid's got it in the bag. Fast forward to Mexico and not only has that lead completely evaporated, but Piastri actually lost the championship lead to his teammate. They're separated by a single point now with Norris on top and just 4 races left. Absolutely mental. Let's start with what went down on race day because the opening lap was absolutely bonkers. Norris launched brilliantly from pole, probably the best start out of anyone, which was crucial because pole at Mexico City isn't actually that much of an advantage. You've got this massive run down to turn 1, something like 800 meters, which means slipstreaming is huge. Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen, who started further back, they both had a proper go at the leaders into that first corner, and this is where it gets spicy. Both Leclerc and Verstappen went completely off track, cutting across the grass at turn 1, and they just rejoined without losing positions. George Russell was absolutely fuming about this, and honestly, you can see why. He called it a lawnmower race afterwards, saying it's like drivers have this get-out-of-jail-free card where they can risk everything, and if it goes wrong, they just cut the corner and carry on. Russell reckons it happens almost every year at Mexico, mentioning Carlos Sainz doing it last year, Leclerc the year before. He pointed out that if there was gravel there, instead of tarmac runoff, nobody would even try it. The drama didn't stop there though. A few laps in, Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton got into a right old scrap. Max dived down the inside at turn 1, there was a bit of contact, Hamilton got forced wide, Verstappen cut the next corner. Then at turn 4, Hamilton locked up and went down the escape road, cut across the grass, which he described as the dustiest place on earth, and rejoined ahead of Verstappen. And here's where the stewards got involved. Hamilton got slapped with a 10-second time penalty for leaving the circuit and gaining an advantage. Now Hamilton was not happy about this at all. He pointed out that he had a brilliant start, got into P2 cleanly through turns 1, 2 and 3, didn't go off track at all, while others cut corners and held position without penalties. He said the turn 1 incident with Verstappen was just racing. He was fine with that, but he couldn't understand why he was the only one to cop a penalty when multiple drivers had gone off. Ferrari team boss Fred Vasseur also had a go at how the penalty was managed, clearly feeling his driver was hard done by. Hamilton ended up finishing 8th, which absolutely ruined what could have been a podium battle. Meanwhile, George Russell was having his own nightmare at Mercedes. He was stuck behind his rookie teammate Kimi Antonelli and getting increasingly frustrated on the radio. Russell kept telling the team he had way more pace than Kimi and could fight for a podium if they let him through, but Mercedes took ages to make a call. At one point, Russell proper lost it on the radio, shouting that he's got a McLaren right up behind him, Oscar Piastri, and his tyres are getting destroyed just sitting there in Antonelli's DRS train. When they finally let him past, Russell gave them a sarcastic, "Ah, great," over the radio. Classic. He said afterwards that they should either make the call straight away or not at all, because by the time they swapped positions, his tyres were cooked and he couldn't attack Behrman ahead. Both Mercedes drivers ended up 6th and 7th, which is pretty disappointing when they're fighting Ferrari for 2nd in the constructors. Speaking of Ferrari, they're suddenly looking proper competitive again. Leclerc finished 2nd, which is his 2nd podium in a row after Austin, and the team finally seems to have found something after a really rough middle part of the season. But Leclerc got massively lucky at the end. His tyres were completely gone, he admitted as much, and Verstappen on fresh softs was absolutely flying, closing in rapidly. On the penultimate lap, with Max right in DRS range and about to pounce, a virtual safety car got deployed because Carlos Sainz's Williams stopped in the stadium section. That VSC basically froze the race, and by the time it ended, the checkered flag was already in sight. Leclerc was saved. He said afterwards, "I was quite happy about the VSC at the end." My tyres were completely gone. I could see Max was coming back on the softs. It was tough, but the VSC saved me at the end." Verstappen, to his credit, was pretty philosophical about it, saying you win some, you lose some when it comes to safety cars. Verstappen's race was actually brilliant when you consider where he started. P5 on the grid, and crucially he was the only one near the front on medium tyres, while everyone around him was on softs. Red Bull gambled on this because their practice data showed the mediums could work. The first stint was absolutely hectic for Max. He called it very hectic and said it was about surviving the first stint, with everyone around him on softs. He got forced over the grass at turn 1, nearly crashed, then had the whole Hamilton incident. But once he switched to softs, he was flying, pulling off some vintage aggressive overtakes and making it onto the podium from P5. Not bad at all, even if the car clearly isn't dominant anymore. But let's talk about Oliver Bearman for a second, because the Haas rookie was absolutely brilliant. He finished 4th, which is a career best result for him, and he earned it properly. He was overtaking people left and right, including Verstappen at one point, which is pretty impressive for a rookie. Bearman proved why Ferrari's been keeping an eye on him as a potential future driver. His father was going absolutely mental in the Haas garage, and honestly, fair play. Now the elephant in the room, Oscar Piastri. What on earth is going on with him? He qualified 8th, over 6/10 behind Norris, then had a disaster at the start, dropping to 9th by the end of lap 1 when he hit a patch of dirt at turn 1. He recovered to 5th, which is decent damage limitation, but he's now lost the championship lead for the first time since April. And more worryingly, he doesn't seem to understand what's wrong. Piastri's been really candid about his struggles, saying he's had to drive very differently these last couple of weekends, but he hadn't made those changes when he should have. He mentioned that after Saturday's session in Mexico, it became obvious he needed to change things pretty majorly in how he was driving. The thing is, McLaren hasn't brought any upgrades for ages, so the car hasn't changed. Norris has clearly adapted to something, maybe tyre behaviour, track conditions, setup changes, and Piastri hasn't. He described his driving style over the past couple weekends as not particularly natural for him, which is a massive red flag when you're in a tight championship fight. Piastri was over 42 seconds behind Norris at the checkered flag and admitted he spent most of the race stuck in dirty air behind other cars, which made it hard to tell if his driving changes were working. He's trying to add tools to his toolbox rather than reinvent himself, as he put it, but with just 4 races to go and a 1-point deficit, time is running out. McLaren team principal Andrea Stella had previously insisted Piastri's bad weekend in Baku wasn't about championship pressure, comparing it to one-off bad weekends that even Michael Schumacher had. But Mexico proved Baku wasn't a one-off. This is now multiple weekends where Piastri's been off the pace, and the championship that looked sewn up is now wide open. Oh, and here's a weird one. Norris got booed during the post-race interviews, like properly booed by the crowd in the stadium section. It's not entirely clear why. Some reckon it's because Verstappen's massively popular and fans were upset to see him not winning. Others think it might be related to some ridiculous conspiracy theories floating around on social media about McLaren allegedly sabotaging Piastri, which is complete nonsense but gets people riled up. When the boos rang out, Norris paused, composed himself brilliantly and said, "I'm focused on myself. I keep my head down, I ignore all of this, and yeah, I keep to myself. And it's working at the minute." Class response, really. Norris described his race as pretty straightforward, which is exactly what he needed. He kept his eyes forward, controlled the pace, managed his tyres, and cruised to his 10th career win with that massive 30.324-second margin. It's his first win in Mexico, and it moved him back to the top of the championship for the first time since April. When asked how he'll approach the final 4 rounds, he said, "It's one weekend at a time, which is probably the right mindset when things are this tight." The championship standings now show Norris leading Piastri by 1 point, with Verstappen 36 points back and still mathematically in the hunt. Ferrari's resurgence means they're clawing back points in the constructors' fight too, sitting just 1 point behind Mercedes now, with Red Bull 10 behind Ferrari. So what does all this mean going forward? Well, Piastri needs to figure out his driving issues fast, because if he can't match Norris over the next 4 weekends, his championship dream is done. Norris has all the momentum now, he's won, he's leading, and he's clearly got his head in the right place. Verstappen's still dangerous and can't be written off, but Red Bull's car isn't good enough to dominate like it did in previous years, and Ferrari's timing their upswing perfectly to potentially grab second in the constructors, though it's probably too late for the driver's title. The Mexican Grand Prix was supposed to be straightforward with Norris dominating, but underneath that dominance was a race full of controversy, penalties, team orders, strategic gambles, and a title fight that's been completely turned on its head. With Brazil, Las Vegas, Qatar and Abu Dhabi still to come, this championship is shaping up to be one of the most dramatic finishes we've seen in years. What do you reckon? Can Piastri rediscover his form and snatch the title back, or is this Norris's championship to lose now? And was that VSC saving Leclerc a bit too convenient, or just racing luck? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.